Inside the crowded clinic, a barefoot little girl clutching a baby pleaded with the doctor,
"Please, help us. Don't let our mom die."
She had no idea that a quiet, lonely man standing behind her heard every word, and what he did next would change her life forever. Take a moment to let us know where you're watching from today. It's a wonderful reminder that regardless of where we live, we're all looking for the same light and inspiration. Knowing you're out there sharing these moments with us makes every story that much more meaningful. Enjoy today's video, everyone. Denver's winter didn't drift gently. It carved through the city in sharp, unforgiving strokes, turning every breath into vapor and every shadow into something brittle. The glass exterior of Caldwell Medical Tower glowed against the storm as Ethan Caldwell stepped out of the VIP wing, adjusting the collar of his charcoal overcoat. He had just finished visiting a longtime business partner recovering from critical cardiac surgery. It was supposed to be a routine courtesy visit, shake hands, offer reassurances, exchange a few quiet words about resilience. Nothing more. His phone buzzed. "Engine trouble. I'm stuck near the main ER entrance. Backup vehicle in 10 minutes. Ethan exhaled through his nose. Of all nights. He preferred order plans that didn't deviate, schedules that didn't bend. But tonight the universe seemed intent on nudging him off his carefully drawn path. With no desire to stand idle in the cold, he pushed through the inner doors and cut across the hospital's public emergency wing. A minor inconvenience, a short walk, a detour that should have meant nothing. But destiny often hides in the space of a few steps. The moment he entered the public ER corridor, the change in atmosphere hit him like a wave. Gone were the hushed voices and soft lighting of the VIP suites. Here, the world throbbed with raw human urgency. Children cried in their parents' arms. Nurses hurried with overstuffed charts. A man in a wheelchair pressed a towel to his bleeding arm. Someone shouted for a doctor. The air carried the thick scent of disinfectant and stress. Ethan slowed his pace. This wasn't a place he frequented, not because he didn't care, but because he had lived too many nights in hospitals already. He avoided them whenever he could, but tonight he couldn't avoid what came next. A fragile voice cut through the chaos. Not loud, not dramatic, but trembling in a way that pierced straight through the noise.
"Please, don't let our mom die."
Ethan turned sharply. There, standing at the triage counter, was a little girl no older than 6, her hair drenched and stringy, her yellow dress soaked through as if she had walked miles in the snow. In her arms, she carried a 10-month-old baby, bundled in a worn blanket. Her small body trembled as she tried to hold the infant steady. Her eyes, red, wide, terrified, locked onto the doctor who was trying to speak calmly, though the patient files piled around her screamed of exhaustion. Before the doctor could answer, another woman stepped forward, Carla Denton, the hospital's administrator. Her voice was taut, tired, and stretched thin by a night that had clearly broken her patience long before this moment. She placed a stack of folders onto the counter with a dull thud. "It isn't about money, Mr. Caldwell," she said when she spotted him nearby. "The system is drowning. We've already turned away 3 homeless families tonight. We cannot admit another without documentation. It's policy." There was no hostility in her tone, no malice, just a crushing kind of resignation. The little girl stared at Carla with a look no child should know, the defeated understanding that the world was too big, too loud, too indifferent to hear her. Then she turned toward Ethan. Her lower lip quivered, her chest hitched with uneven breaths. And before he could step back, she reached out, a tiny hand trembling violently from cold and fear, and gripped the sleeve of his expensive wool coat. Her voice cracked open. "Sir, Can you make adults listen?" The corridor seemed to fall silent around him. Ethan didn't look at her face first. He looked at her hand. So small, so cold, her fingers red from exposure. A child clinging to him with the last ounce of hope she had left. Then he looked down. Her shoes, muddy, soaked, nearly falling apart, stood beside his. The contrast was brutal, her world and his, pressed together by desperation. She took a shaky breath, eyes filling again. "If she dies, we won't have anybody left," she whispered, like she was confessing a secret the world had already decided it didn't want to hear. A memory surged before he could stop it. Another child's hand, years ago, another hospital corridor, another desperate plea he couldn't answer. His breath stalled, his heartbeat thundered in his ears, his vision tunneled on the little girl's face. The pleading eyes, the way she clutched the baby protectively, the way she tried to hold back full sobs like she'd learned crying didn't help. Something deep in him cracked. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. The child's words, "If she dies, we won't have anybody left," echoed inside him with a force he hadn't felt in years. The ER lights seemed to flicker, blurring into the sterile walls he had once known far too well. He forced himself to blink, grounding his breath as he looked down at Lily, her hand still gripping his sleeve with the desperate steadiness of a drowning child holding on to driftwood. He should walk away. That was the rule he'd lived by since the night his world collapsed. Don't get involved. Don't step into pain you can't undo. Don't make promises you can't keep. He told himself that again now, silently, firmly, almost angrily. But his feet refused to move. Instead, he watched the girl adjust the baby in her arms, trying to keep the infant's face warm against the thin fabric of her dress. The baby whimpered, her tiny hand curling weakly against the little girl's collarbone. The little girl shifted her weight, trying to look strong even though her knees trembled beneath her. A nurse hurried past without noticing them. A stretcher rolled by with a man shouting in pain. A janitor pushed a mop bucket around a spill. The world around these two little girls kept turning, kept rushing, kept ignoring. Ethan took one step back, trying to detach himself. He couldn't. The girl followed, clutching his coat again with that same small hand. "Sir?" Her voice wavered but didn't break. "People with money, they can fix things, right?" She swallowed hard, as if repeating something she'd overheard many times. "That's what Mommy said. Money makes people listen." The simplicity of the statement hit Ethan harder than it should have. She wasn't asking for a miracle. She wasn't begging him to be a hero. She was asking for something painfully small, someone who adults listened to. He drew in a slow breath, steadying his voice before speaking. "Where is your mother now?" "Down the hall." Lily pointed again. "On the floor. She's really cold, and she won't wake up." He crouched slightly, meeting the girl's eyes. Up close, he could see how she was trying to be brave, how she fought each tear as if holding it back might keep her world from fully falling apart. "What's your name?" Ethan asked softly. "Lily," she whispered, "and this is Mia." The baby whimpered again, cheeks flushed with fever or cold, he couldn't tell which. Lily rocked her gently, instinctively, her arms tightening protectively. Ethan pressed his lips together, turning toward Carla. "Where is the mother?" "Down the hall, according to her." Carla glanced at Lily. "But we can't." "We can," Ethan said, his voice razor-sharp now, the tone of a man used to ending negotiations, not starting them. "And we will. I want a medical team there immediately." Carla blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Caldwell, you don't understand." "No," Ethan cut in, "you don't understand. His voice wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It carried the authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had navigated boardrooms where billions shifted with a single phrase. He stepped past Carla, but Lily grabbed his coat, not to stop him, but to stay close, as though moving farther than arm's reach from him might make the help she'd begged for disappear. "Sir?" Lily whispered. Are you going to help us?" He swallowed hard. Something tightened in his chest, an old wound stretching, aching, trying to awaken. "I'm going to see your mom," he said gently. "Come with me." Lily nodded and hurried beside him, clutching Mia close. The three of them walked down the corridor, navigating the chaos together. Ethan noticed how carefully Lily stepped, as though afraid the slippery floor might make her drop her sister. He instinctively placed a hand near her back, not touching, just ready to catch her if she stumbled. He could not walk away. Not tonight. Not from them. Not again. The hallway outside the ER felt colder than the winter night Ethan had just stepped in from. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, throwing pale reflections across the tiles as nurses hurried past with clipboards and crash carts. But all of that faded to the edges the moment Ethan saw Grace Hart lying on the floor, unmoving, breath-thin, skin washed of color. Lily knelt beside her, still trying to shake her mother awake with tiny hands that trembled more with fear than with cold. Mia whimpered softly from the crook of her sister's arm, her little face pressed against the threadbare blanket. Ethan inhaled, the sharp sting of antiseptic hitting his nose as he crouched beside them. "Stay with your sister," he told Lily gently, scanning Grace's condition with a practiced eye. He wasn't a doctor, but he had spent far too many nights in hospitals watching monitors, learning patterns, memorizing symptoms out of desperation. His hand reached instinctively toward Grace's wrist, and then froze as the sleeve of her coat slipped back just enough for him to see it. A bracelet. A cheap plastic one made of mismatched beads. Blue, yellow, purple arranged in a broken pattern, so close to the one his daughter had once insisted he wear to every board meeting to keep him safe, that, for a second, it stole his breath. He knew 1,000 kids could have strung beads in that same clumsy order, but his heart didn't care about the odds. It only felt the echo. Behind him, hurried footsteps approached. Dr. Rachel Lynn skidded to a stop beside Ethan, her face tightening as she took in the scene. "Get her on a gurney," she ordered without hesitation. 2 nurses moved in immediately, lifting Grace with practiced care. Mia began to cry at the sudden movement, and Lily stood with her, clutching her tightly, her wide eyes tracking every motion. Ethan rose slowly as Grace was placed on the stretcher. "Do everything you can," he said to the doctor, though the words came out rougher than he intended, like an order masking a plea. Dr. Lynn gave one quick nod. "I will, but her vitals are unstable. We need to move fast." As the team rushed Grace down the corridor, Ethan glanced down at Lily and Mia walking beside him. Lily's steps were frantic but determined, as though she feared her mother might disappear if she fell even a second behind the gurney. Her thin shoes squeaked on the tile with each hurried step. They reached examination room 6. Nurses cleared the area with sweeping efficiency, machines humming to life as Dr. Lynn called out commands. Ethan stayed near the doorway at first, observing the storm of medical activity through a widening haze of memory. He remembered another room like this, years ago, white walls, cold machines, a child so small she could barely lift her hand. His daughter had worn a bracelet, too, hers brighter, newer, her small fingers threading the beads one by one with all the seriousness in the world. "Daddy, don't be scared. I made this so you won't be sad later." He had promised her he wouldn't be. And he had lied. "Sir?" Lily's voice pulled him back. She had turned toward him, eyes shining not just with fear, but with trust. Trust she had no reason to offer him, yet she did anyway. "Can we stay? Can we be here with her?" The question crushed him somehow. He stepped into the room fully now, ignoring the looks from staff, and placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, not guiding her, just grounding her. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not without her." Dr. Lynn lifted her gaze just long enough to speak to him directly. "Mr. Caldwell, the infection has spread significantly. We'll run tests, but I'll be honest, this didn't start tonight." Lily tugged at Ethan's coat again. "She got sick last week. She tried to get better so we wouldn't worry. She never wants us to worry." Her small voice wavered, but she stood firm, shoulders squared in that heartbreaking way children sometimes mimic adulthood. Ethan knelt beside her, bringing himself to eye level. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay to be scared." "I'm not scared," Lily whispered, blinking hard. I'm just tired of people saying they can't help." There it was again, that fracture in him widening, letting light in and pain out. He wanted to tell her she should never have had to be this strong. He wanted to tell her none of this was her fault. Instead, he simply nodded, the most honest response he had. The machines beeped erratically as Grace stirred faintly, her breathing uneven. Lily gasped. "Mommy?" She rushed forward until Ethan leaned in and put a steadying hand on her back. "Give them space," he murmured. "I just want her to hear me," Lily pleaded. Sometimes she hears me when she's sleeping." Dr. Lynn looked over, softening just slightly. "Talk to her from here, sweetheart. She might still hear you." Lily stepped closer but remained where Ethan guided her. She placed Mia carefully in the chair beside them, then clasped her hands together, as if praying. "Mommy, it's me. I brought Mia. We found help, okay? You just have to wake up a little bit." Grace didn't move. A tear slipped down Lily's cheek. She didn't wipe it. She just stared at her mother, trembling with hope and terror intertwined. Ethan swallowed hard. The last time he felt this helpless, he'd been holding his daughter's hand under bright hospital lights, begging the universe to give him one more hour. He had given up on hope after that night. But here, watching Lily clutch her baby sister and whisper to her unconscious mother, something inside him stirred in ways he didn't understand yet. "Mr. Caldwell," Carla's voice called quietly from the doorway. "We've prepared a room, but we need signatures to bypass intake protocols." "I'll sign whatever you need," he said, without looking at her. Carla hesitated. "She needs more than a room. If this infection has been untreated this long, surgery may be the only option." Dr. Lynn stepped in. "We're preparing for it now, but we need consent. There's no guardian present." Ethan turned slightly, meeting Carla's eyes with a stare that brooked no argument. "You said it yourself. You're drowning. Let me keep you afloat tonight." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't arrogance. It was a fact stated with clarity and weight. Carla nodded slowly, understanding exactly what he meant. Lily tugged on Ethan's coat again. "Sir?" she murmured. "She doesn't wake up when I talk to her. She used to wake up right away." Her voice cracked on the last words. Ethan placed a steady hand over hers. "She just needs help to come back." "But will she?" Lily whispered. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward Grace's still form, the bead bracelet catching on the fabric of the sheet. The past pressed against his chest like a weight he hadn't felt in years. He had failed once, but tonight he wasn't letting history repeat itself, not again. Not if there was the smallest chance to change the ending for someone else. "We're not giving up," he said finally. "Not tonight." As if on cue, the heart monitor beeped more erratically. Dr. Lin barked out orders and nurses rushed in. Ethan scooped Mia into his arms to keep her safe from the sudden swarm of activity. The baby curled instinctively against him, her tiny fingers gripping his coat. And Lily Small, determined, terrified, Lily pressed herself against his side, watching everything with eyes far too old for her age. Ethan stayed rooted there, holding both girls as the medical team fought to stabilize their mother, standing between the past that haunted him and the fragile new world he had just stepped into. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment he had already crossed the line from bystander to protector. The moment the crash team wheeled Grace toward the surgical wing, the hallway erupted into a tense choreography of urgency nurses calling out vitals, Dr. Lin ordering prep procedures, monitors chiming in irregular rhythms that made Lily flinch with each spike of sound. Ethan stayed close, holding Mia against his chest as the infant fussed, her forehead damp with fever. He wasn't used to holding children anymore. The last time he had cradled a baby this small, he had been standing in a hospital room much like this one, praying for a miracle that never came. But Mia settled into him with surprising ease, her tiny hand curling weakly into the fabric of his coat, as though she already knew he was the warmest place in the room. "Mr. Caldwell, we need to get her to operating room 3, Dr. Lin called out, her tone clipped, focused. "This infection is severe. There's swelling, internal bleeding. We don't have hours to spare." Lily, who had been walking beside the stretcher, stumbled at the words. She clutched the side rail, fingers white from gripping. She's going to wake up after, right?" Her gaze darted anxiously between Dr. Lin and her mother's motionless body. Dr. Lin paused just long enough to kneel, placing a hand gently on Lily's shoulder. "Sweetheart, we're going to do everything we can." But the look she exchanged with Ethan, one of heavy uncertainty, said everything Lily was too young to understand. The surgical doors swung open, swallowing Grace and the team of medical staff in a burst of sharp white light. As soon as they closed again, the hallway fell eerily quiet. Lily's hands dropped from the stretcher rails, and her body sagged as if the strength she'd been holding on to dissolved all at once. Ethan stepped closer just in time to catch her before she slid onto the floor. "Easy," he murmured, shifting Mia carefully in one arm and steadying Lily with the other. Her small frame leaned into him without resistance, her sobs barely audible, as though she was trying not to disturb anyone, even now. Ethan glanced around for a seating area, and when he spotted a row of empty chairs just a few feet away, he guided Lily there. Once she sat, however, she began to shiver violently, her wet yellow dress clinging to her skin. Ethan didn't hesitate. He shrugged off his heavy wool coat, draping it over her shoulders. The garment dwarfed her tiny body, but she pulled it close, burying her nose into the collar as if inhaling warmth she had been denied for hours. "Thank you," she whispered so faintly, he only caught it because the hallway had fallen still again. He eased into the seat beside her, Mia nestled against him. The infant was quieter now, eyes half-lidded, her breaths small and uneven. Ethan angled her higher on his chest, supporting her head with the back of his hand in a gesture that came embarrassingly natural. His mind flashed unbidden to how he used to hold his daughter just like this, her cheek pressed against his shirt while she hummed nonsense songs in her sleep. Lily's voice tugged him back to the present. "Are they going to fix her?" she asked, peeking at him over the oversized collar of his coat. "Dr. Lin said it's risky. Risky means bad, right?" Ethan turned to her fully. "Risky means hard," he said gently, "but that doesn't mean they can't do it." Lily nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. Then her gaze drifted to Mia, who stirred with a small whimper. Lily shifted instinctively, reaching to soothe her sister, but Ethan shook his head softly. "Let me hold her. Your arms need a break." Her lip quivered. "But I'm supposed to keep her warm." "You still are," he said, adjusting the coat around her again. "I'm just helping." Something in Lily's face softened. Gratitude, relief, and something he couldn't quite name yet. Trust, maybe, fragile but forming. Minutes bled into more minutes, the silence punctuated by distant hospital alarms and occasional shouts from down the corridor. Ethan kept glancing toward the surgery doors, his jaw tightening each time they remained closed. For someone who spent his life controlling outcomes, this helpless waiting clawed at him in ways he had buried years ago. A nurse approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Caldwell, we need signatures for emergency consent. You're listed as the responsible adult until next of kin can be identified." Ethan accepted the form without hesitation. Lily, however, stiffened. "Does that mean she's already... "No," Ethan said firmly, kneeling to meet her eyes. "This means I'm making sure they don't stop trying to help her." Lily's breath shuddered out of her, and she nodded once, tightly. After the nurse left, Ethan resumed his seat. Lily leaned against his arm, small and cold and exhausted. At one point, her head dropped involuntarily onto his shoulder. He didn't move. Let her sleep, he thought. Let her rest for the first time in who knows how long. But Lily didn't truly sleep. She drifted in and out, her fingers clutching the sleeve of his shirt, even beneath the wool coat. Each time she stirred, her forehead creased with a worry no child should bear. Ethan found himself brushing damp strands of hair from her face, a gentle gesture that surprised even him. Mia slept too, her breathing evening out now that she was warm. Time kept stretching. The clock ticked past the first hour, then the second. A doctor's voice echoed from the nearby desk. "Prep ICU bed 4 in case she makes it through the operating room," someone said quietly, not daring to call it anything more than a possibility. Lily's eyes snapped open. "They're bringing Mommy back?" "Soon," Ethan assured, though his own chest felt like it was caught between beating too fast and not beating at all. A nurse stopped by again with bottled water and a small blanket. "For the little one," she said softly, handing it to Ethan. It wasn't part of standard procedure. It was kindness, quiet, human. He nodded gratefully and wrapped Mia more securely. As Lily drank water in slow, cautious sips, she looked up at Ethan again. "Sir," she said, voice rough, "will she smile again? Mommy smiles when she's better. She always smiles for me." He hesitated, the memory of his daughter's smile, the last one she gave him, rising like a ghost. He pushed past it, meeting Lily's gaze. "Not until I do everything humanly possible," he said, the conviction in his tone surprising even him. "And I'm just getting started." Lily's shoulders sagged with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. She curled deeper beneath his coat, clutching its lapel as though anchoring herself to safety. Minutes later, her small body finally gave out completely. Her head dropped into his lap as she drifted into sleep, fingers still wrapped tightly around his sleeve, as if afraid he might vanish the moment she loosened her grip. Ethan sat there motionless, holding Mia, keeping Lily warm, listening to the beeping and distant chatter of the ER. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business deals, meetings, or deadlines. Somewhere out in the storm, the backup car had come and gone, his phone buzzing with unanswered calls. But Ethan had stopped reaching for it hours ago. His mind was right here, with these girls, weighed down by a responsibility he hadn't expected but now couldn't imagine stepping away from. The surgical doors remained shut. Time kept moving painfully forward. But Ethan didn't rise, didn't pace, didn't leave. He stayed exactly where Lily needed him to be, her tiny hand gripping him like a lifeline, her sister breathing softly against his chest, her mother fighting for life somewhere behind those doors. As the hallway lights flickered and the storm raged outside, Ethan Caldwell, billionaire, widower, man who swore never to feel this deeply again, became, without realizing it, the one constant presence in their collapsing world. The hours after Lily and Mia fell asleep against him felt both painfully slow and strangely sacred. The storm outside hammered the hospital windows in relentless gusts, turning the ER's fluorescent lights into the only warmth in a world gone white. Ethan remained seated, his back stiff against the plastic chair, his arm numb from supporting Mia's small body. But he didn't shift, didn't readjust, didn't break the fragile cocoon of safety the girls had created around him. Every rise and fall of Mia's breath pressed faintly into his chest, and the weight of Lily's head in his lap anchored him to a purpose he never expected to reclaim. Ethan exhaled slowly. The sensation was unfamiliar, like a steel door inside his chest had finally cracked open, letting in air that felt simultaneously heavy and warm. A nurse glanced over from her station, her expression softening at the sight of the two girls sleeping against him. "They're lucky you were here," she murmured. Ethan didn't look up. "No," he said quietly. "I'm the lucky one." The words left his mouth before he could filter them, and as soon as they did, he realized how true they were. He hadn't felt needed, not truly, deeply needed in years. Not since his daughter. Not since that cold hospital room where he had held a small hand growing colder by the hour. He swallowed, the memory scraping through him like broken glass. Another hour passed. Nurses changed shifts. A monitor buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a newborn cried. The clock above the waiting room ticked with a steady, indifferent rhythm. But in the chair where Ethan sat, time had slowed into something fragile, something real, something that made him forget, for a little while, the boardrooms, the marble offices, the reputation of the man who never cracked. Mia stirred first, letting out a soft whimper. Ethan instinctively rocked her, swaying gently as if the movement were etched into his bones from another lifetime. She settled again, tiny fingers curling and uncurling against his coat in half-formed reflex. Lily woke next, lifting her head from his lap with a start. Panic flashed across her face as she looked for Mia, then softened into relief when she saw the baby safe in his arms. She rubbed her eyes, cheeks flushed from sleep. "Did they bring Mommy back?" she whispered. "Not yet," Ethan said softly, "but they're still helping her." Her lower lip wobbled. Do they know her name?" "Yes," he assured. "They know who she is, and they know you're here waiting for her." Lily nodded, pulling the coat around her tighter, as though trying to recreate the warmth she had created while asleep. The air shifted. Lily blinked, her eyes filling with something between relief and disbelief. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a shout came from the surgical wing. A nurse rushed past them toward the ICU hall. "We're moving her!" she called. Lily jumped to her feet. "Mommy?" Ethan stood with Mia still held securely against him, and together they moved toward the corridor. They reached the edge of the restricted area just in time to see Grace's gurney being pushed through the double doors, nurses surrounding her like a protective shield. Tubes ran from her arms, monitors beeped, and her face, though still pale, seemed less empty than before. Dr. Lin walked beside the gurney. She paused long enough to meet Ethan's gaze. "She made it through surgery," she said, breathless but determined. "But she's unstable. We'll need to monitor her closely." "Can we see her?" Lily asked immediately. "From the hallway," Dr. Lin said, lowering her voice. "Just for a moment." They stepped closer. Lily pressed her small palm against the window, the sterile glass separating her from the mother she desperately needed. "Mommy," she whispered, "I'm here. Mia's here. Don't be scared." Grace didn't stir, but her chest rose and fell, shallow, uneven, but alive. A nurse tightened a strap. Another adjusted an IV line. Grace's monitors beeped with weak but persistent rhythms. Ethan shifted Mia slightly so Lily could lean near him. The warmth of their small bodies anchored him in a way he hadn't expected. He felt no impatience, no rushing sense of needing to be anywhere else. He was exactly where he needed to be. A doctor emerged from behind them, murmuring into a chart. "If she stabilizes, the next 24 hours will tell us how her body responds. It's too early to predict anything." Lily's shoulders drooped, her small frame folding inward with worry. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder, reassurance, grounding. "She's fighting," he said quietly, "and we're staying right here with her." Lily nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. For several minutes they stood there, watching the machines, watching the rise and fall of Grace's chest, watching the flicker of fluorescent light dance across the tiles. Despite the chaos of the hospital around them, the moment felt still, almost reverent. Then the doors to the ICU slid shut again, and the spell broke. And for the first time in years, the promise didn't scare him. It felt right. It felt necessary. It felt like the beginning of something he didn't yet have words for. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something else was beginning. Something quiet, fragile, and life-changing. The hospital corridor had settled into a tense quiet, the kind that clung to the air just after a storm, but long before calm truly returned. The storm outside continued to batter the windows, but inside, everything seemed suspended around the ICU doors where Grace had been taken. Lily sat pressed against Ethan's side, clutching the edge of his coat as if it were the only stable thing in a world spinning too fast. Mia slept in the crook of his other arm, her cheek warm against his chest. Ethan barely dared to shift, afraid any movement might disturb the fragile peace they had managed to build around them. Lily would jerk awake every few minutes, eyes darting anxiously toward the ICU hallway, before settling again when she saw Grace hadn't returned yet. "They said she'd be back," she murmured each time, more to herself than to him. "She will," Ethan assured, though his own heart beat with a steady dread. He had lived through these long waits before, the kind where every second stretched into a question mark, where hope and fear held each other in a chokehold. At last, the ICU doors opened, and Dr. Lin stepped out with a weary, drawn expression. Ethan stood immediately, shifting Mia carefully so he didn't wake her. Lily scrambled to her feet, gripping his hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Dr. Lin approached slowly. "She made it through surgery," she said gently. "But the infection was advanced. We stopped the internal bleeding, but her organs are weak. We'll have to wait to see how she responds." Lily blinked as if trying to process each word individually. Is she going to wake up?" Dr. Lin didn't answer right away. She lowered herself to Lily's height. "Sweetheart, your mom is very strong, but she needs time. Her body is fighting very hard right now." Lily's breath hitched. She pressed her hands to her lips, whispering, "Mommy, please fight. Please?" Ethan rested a hand on her back. "She hears you," he murmured. Dr. Lin gave him a small nod. Gratitude, maybe, for doing what she couldn't, but before either of them could speak again, a nurse hurried over and whispered urgently into Dr. Lin's ear. The doctor's expression shifted, first confusion, then concern. "Show me," she said before following the nurse to the opposite end of the hallway. Ethan watched them disappear around a corner. A minute later, a stern voice spoke from behind him. "Mr. Caldwell?" Ethan turned. A man in a dark coat stood there, mid-40s, tall, composed. A badge hung from a lanyard tucked into his pocket. "Detective Marcus Reed," the man said. Ethan's spine straightened. He held Mia more securely. "Is there a problem?" Reed's gaze flicked briefly to Lily, who shrank behind Ethan at the sight of the badge. Then his eyes returned to Ethan. "I need to speak with you privately. It's about the woman who was just taken into ICU." Ethan glanced at Lily. Her small fingers clutched his coat, trembling. "Anything you have to say," he said, "you can say in front of them." Reed shook his head once. "It's sensitive." Lily whispered, "Sir, please don't go." Ethan crouched beside her. "I'm not going anywhere. He can talk to us here." Reed hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small notepad. "The woman, Grace Hart. You found her unconscious?" "Her daughters found her," Ethan corrected. "I was there when they brought me to her." Reed nodded. "And she's been sick for how long?" "Over a week," Lily answered before Ethan could. Her voice was quiet but steady. "She tried to get better. She didn't want to worry us." Reed's jaw tightened. "And you've been staying where?" "A shelter," Lily said. She hugged Mia against her. "When they had space." Reed closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again with a sharper edge. "Mr. Caldwell, there's something you need to know." He paused. "Grace isn't just sick. She's been running." Ethan frowned. "From what?" "From her husband," Reed said. "Or ex-husband. We're still confirming the legal status. Either way, she reported him for domestic assault 3 months ago. Severe assault. Nearly killed her." Lily's breathing hitched sharply. She grabbed Ethan's arm with both hands, shaking her head. No, we don't talk about him. Mommy said never to talk about him." Reed crouched slightly, softening his voice. "I know you're scared, sweetheart. You're very brave. But we need to make sure he doesn't find you." Lily hid her face against Ethan's coat, her shoulders trembling. Ethan's jaw clenched, a slow burn rising beneath his sternum. He thought back to Grace's fragile pulse, her pale skin, the old bruises he'd glimpsed during intake. A cold realization settled in his chest. "This wasn't sickness," he said quietly. "This was trauma." Reed nodded. "There were signs, old fractures, rib injuries, wrist bones that healed wrong. She didn't collapse because she was clumsy or unlucky. She collapsed because her body's been breaking down from months of evading him." Mia whimpered in Ethan's arms, sensing the tension. Lily looked up with wide, terrified eyes. "Is he going to come here? For Mommy? For us?" Reed didn't answer right away. He rose slowly. "We just got a hit on her name from a patrol car," he finally said. "A man has been calling hospitals within a 50-mile radius, asking if anyone under her name was brought in." Lily made a tiny, sound, half gasp, half sob, and clung to Ethan with both hands. Ethan stood tall, shifting Mia to his other arm and pulling Lily closer. "What are you doing about it?" "We're moving officers to the entrance," Reed said. "We're flagging her file so nobody releases her location, but you should understand he's persistent and dangerous, and if he finds out that she made it to a hospital—" "He won't," Ethan cut in, his voice turning to steel. "Not here. Not tonight." Reed studied him, as if recalibrating his assumptions. "You're taking responsibility for the girls?" "I'm taking responsibility for all of them," Ethan said. "And I'm not leaving." Reed exhaled slowly. "Good, because this isn't just about medicine anymore. She needs legal protection, and fast." Ethan turned, eyes hardening. "Then get it," he said. "Whatever it takes." Reed nodded. "We will. But understand this is far from over." Ethan looked back at Grace, then at Lily, then at Mia, asleep against his chest. Over? No. For him, this was only the beginning. The storm outside had finally softened into a quiet, steady fall. Snow drifting like pale ash against the hospital windows, but inside the ICU corridor, tension still clung to the air like static. Detective Reed lingered near the nurse's station, speaking in hushed tones with an officer who'd just arrived. The officer nodded gravely, then headed toward the building's main exit. Reed rubbed the bridge of his nose, his expression a hardened mix of fatigue and determination. "Mr. Caldwell," he said finally, approaching, "I've stationed 2 officers at the front and 1 at the ambulance bay. We're also restricting visitor access in this wing. No one comes in without clearance." "Good," Ethan replied, adjusting Mia in his arms. His voice held no politeness, only resolve. "And Grace?" Reed glanced toward the ICU window where Grace lay beneath a nest of wires and machines. "She's stable for now, but she needs rest. The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical." Lily stood pressed to the glass, her small palm splayed against it as though she could transfer warmth through the barrier. "She moved her hand a little," she whispered, "when I said her name." "She hears you," Ethan murmured, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "She's fighting." Lily nodded, leaning slightly into him. A moment later, the social worker arrived, Ms. Dalton, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She carried a thick folder and a calm, practiced expression, stepping toward them with a sympathetic smile. "Mr. Caldwell, Detective Reed." "Lily, sweetheart, I'm Ms. Dalton. I'm here to help your family." Lily took half a step back, her hands tightening into fists. Are you taking us away?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Ms. Dalton's expression softened immediately. "No, dear, I'm here to make sure you're safe. All of you, including your mom." Lily's shoulders sagged with a mixture of relief and fear. Ms. Dalton turned to Ethan. "I understand you've been with the girls since last night." He nodded. "They shouldn't be alone right now." "And you're not family," she added gently. "But you stepped up for them. That matters more than you know." Ethan didn't answer. He simply looked at Lily, how she hovered close, how her small fingers brushed the fabric of his coat, as if confirming he was still there. Ms. Dalton opened her folder. "Given the circumstances, the girls can't leave the hospital without a temporary guardian appointed. Grace is incapacitated, and their father—" At that, Lily's head snapped up, her face going white. "No," she whispered. "No, he can't come. He can't." "He won't," Ethan said firmly before the social worker could speak. "He's not taking them." Ms. Dalton nodded. "Detective Reed has already filed an emergency protection order, but we need someone to assume responsibility until Grace wakes and can speak for herself." She hesitated, then looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, Lily seems to trust you. You've kept them safe. Would you be willing to be listed as their temporary guardian?" Lily's breath caught. She looked up at him with wide, searching eyes. Ethan felt something in him shift so profoundly he couldn't ignore it. He looked between the girls, their fragile trust, their exhaustion, their need. Something inside him answered faster than his logic could catch up. "Yes," he said. "Of course." Miss Dalton smiled, both relief and gratitude in her expression. "I'll bring the paperwork." Lily exhaled sharply, her small shoulders shaking with a release of tension she'd been holding for far too long. She moved closer to Ethan, leaning against him as if she were somehow weightless in the moment. "Thank you," she whispered. He rested his hand gently atop her head. "You're safe." A nurse approached then. "Mr. Caldwell? Grace's vitals have improved slightly. If you'd like, Lily can stand at her bedside, but only for a minute." "Can I?" Lily gasped. "Let's go," Ethan said softly. He carried Mia while Lily walked beside him to the ICU entrance. When they stepped inside, the room felt smaller than it had from the hallway, warm air humming faintly from vents above, the white sheets bright against Grace's pale skin. Machines beeped in fragile but steady rhythms. "Mommy?" Lily whispered, approaching the bed. She reached for Grace's hand but paused halfway, terrified she might break her. "It's okay," Ethan murmured, guiding her hand gently. Lily's fingers slid over Grace's. Her mother's hand twitched barely, but enough. Lily let out a choked sob. "Mommy, I'm here. Please come back. Please." Grace's eyelids fluttered, her lips parting in a faint breath. Ethan watched the moment with a tightness gathering around his heart, not fear, but an overwhelming ache at witnessing a bond he had lost once and was now somehow protecting again. "Time's up," the nurse whispered with genuine gentleness. "She needs rest." Lily kissed her mother's hand. "I'll be right outside," she whispered. Ethan led her out, Mia still sleeping against him. When they returned to the hallway, Miss Dalton handed him the documents. He signed without pause. Lily watched each stroke of his pen, eyes bright, as though she were memorizing the moment. "You're staying?" she asked when he finished. Ethan crouched in front of her, balancing Mia carefully. "I'm not going anywhere." Her face crumpled, not in fear this time, but in relief so deep it nearly undid him. She threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "You're the only one who didn't leave," she whispered. He closed his eyes and wrapped one arm around her, holding her as gently as he could. "I won't," he promised, and for the first time in years, saying the words didn't terrify him. Miss Dalton cleared her throat gently. "One more thing. Grace will need somewhere safe to recover when she's discharged, and with the protection order in place, she can't return to any shelter." "She won't," Ethan said immediately. "I'll arrange housing, somewhere secure." "That will help," Ms. Dalton said. "A lot." Detective Reed approached them again. "The order went through," he said. "Her ex can't come within a mile of this building, and with officers at the exits, he won't get close." Lily's hand slipped into Ethan's. Can we stay with you? Just until Mommy wakes up?" Ethan looked down at her small, trembling hand wrapped around his. Then he looked at Mia, sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Lily," he said softly, "as long as you need me, even after your mother wakes up, you have a place with me." She nodded, tears spilling again, but they weren't the same tears as before. These were warm, relieved, anchored by safety she hadn't felt in a long time. Then Grace's voice, weak, raspy, echoed faintly from the ICU doorway. "Please, don't let him take my daughters." It wasn't loud. It wasn't strong. But it was enough to freeze every adult in the corridor. Ethan looked at Reed, then at Miss Dalton, then back at Lily and Mia. "I won't," he said. And he meant every word. Spring arrived slowly in Denver, as if the world needed extra time to thaw from a winter that had pressed far too hard on everyone inside that hospital. Snowbanks shrank to slush under the soft April sun, and the icy wind that once cut through the streets now drifted warm across budding trees. For the first time in months, the sky felt wide again. Inside the cozy cottage on the east side of the city, the one Ethan had secured within days of Grace's initial recovery, the morning light spilled through thin curtains onto a living room floor scattered with colored pencils, board books, and the tiny mismatched socks Mia liked to remove every few minutes. The once empty home now looked lived in, warm, filled with signs of small chaos and even smaller victories. Ethan stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes with a clumsy determination that would have made his board members laugh in disbelief. He wasn't used to cooking. Breakfast meetings had always been catered, dinner events hosted, lunches taken in between meetings. But now he had filled this kitchen drawer with spatulas instead of financial summaries. The scent of vanilla and warm batter filled the cottage. Behind him, the creak of tiny footsteps made him turn. Lily stood at the doorway, rubbing her eyes, wrapped in the oversized cardigan he used to keep in his office. It looked like a robe on her, the sleeves dangling, the hem brushing her shins. "Morning," he said softly. She patted across the room and leaned into him without hesitation. "Morning," she mumbled into his side. "Is Mommy awake?" "She'll be up soon," he assured, brushing a hand over her hair. Grace had been home for 2 weeks now. She was still weak, moving slowly, tiresome breaths revealing her body's long recovery path. But she was healing. She was laughing again in soft bursts, careful but real. She spent every hour with her daughters, holding Mia for as long as her strength allowed, brushing Lily's hair with trembling fingers, whispering thank yous to Ethan every time he brought her tea, carried laundry, or sat with her when the nightmares came. And every time she whispered those thanks, Ethan shook his head. "It's nothing," he'd say. But Grace always answered, "It's everything." Lily shuffled to the kitchen table where her crayon drawing, now framed and sitting in the center, rested like a centerpiece. The drawing of the three of them, Lily, Mia, and Ethan. His figure still had that faint halo above the head. "This is my favorite thing in the house," he said, glancing at the drawing. She smiled shyly. "I'm glad you like it." "I love it," he corrected, flipping another pancake. "It reminds me to stay where I'm needed." Lily's cheeks warmed with pride. A gentle knock came from the hallway. "Is it safe to enter the pancake zone?" Grace called out. Her voice, though still scratchy, carried a warmth that filled the room. Ethan set down the spatula as she stepped into the kitchen, leaning lightly on the cane the physical therapist insisted she use. She wore a soft gray sweater and loose cotton pants, her hair tied back, her eyes brighter than he had ever seen them in the hospital. She paused, watching Lily nestle against Ethan as naturally as if she'd done it her whole life. For a moment, emotion flickered through Grace's face. Gratitude, disbelief, something tender and fragile all at once. "Good morning," Ethan said, pulling out a chair for her. "Good morning." Grace eased into the seat. "You're up early." "Pancake duty," he said. "I'm getting better." "Debatable?" Lily whispered loudly. Ethan feigned offense. "You wound me." Grace laughed, a soft, incredulous sound, as she watched the banter unfold. "I can't believe how quickly she's warmed up to you," she said quietly. Ethan glanced down at Lily. "I didn't give her much choice." "No," Grace said, her expression growing serious. "You gave her what she needed." Before Ethan could respond, Mia began fussing from the crib in the living room. Lily ran over to pick her up, but Ethan stepped in gently. "I've got her," he said. He lifted Mia easily, cradling her with practiced arms as she blinked up at him with a sleepy, gummy smile. Her tiny hands grabbed at his chin, tugging softly. Ethan kissed the top of her head, something he'd started doing without thinking. Grace watched him with quiet intensity, her eyes shimmering. "She loves you," she whispered. Mia burbled happily against his shoulder. "And so do I," Lily added from under the table where she had crawled to retrieve a fallen crayon. Ethan froze, not dramatic, but visibly moved. He looked at Grace, who held his gaze openly, honestly, without fear. She spoke as though reading his thoughts. "You didn't have to stay," she said softly. "You didn't owe us anything. You barely knew us." He shifted Mia gently, his expression softening. "Grace, I didn't stay out of obligation." She swallowed. "Then why?" He took a slow breath. The cottage felt too small, too quiet for the weight of the truth he finally allowed himself to say. "Because," Ethan said, "I saw a family that needed someone. And I realized I needed you too." Grace's eyes filled instantly, and she pressed her fingers to her lips. Lily crawled into her mother's lap, resting her head against her chest, sensing the emotion even if she didn't understand it entirely. Ethan walked closer, placing Mia into Grace's arms. The baby settled instantly, nuzzling into her mother. Grace held both daughters close, her tears slipping freely now. "You gave us back our life," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay that." "You already have," he answered. She frowned gently. "How?" He crouched beside them. "You let me feel again. You let me hold them. You let me care." He swallowed tightly. "It's more than I ever thought I'd have again." Grace placed her hand over his, her touch warm despite her frailty. "Then stay," she said. "Stay with us, if you want to." Ethan nodded, not rushed, not afraid, just certain. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. The moment held long and soft between them until Lily broke it with a squeal. "Mommy, Ethan burned the pancake." "I did not," Ethan began, but Grace and Lily's laughter drowned him out. And in that small cottage filled with mismatched socks, crayon drawings, and the smell of burnt pancakes, a new life quietly rooted itself. Not the polished life Ethan once lived, not the fearful life Grace and her daughters had survived, but something rebuilt piece by piece, heart by heart. A family formed not by blood, but by choice, by tenderness, and by the courage to stay when it mattered most. And that's where this story comes to a close for me. Sharing it with you stirred something I didn't expect. Sometimes life brings us people not to save us, but to remind us we're still capable of loving. This story showed me again that healing really begins the moment we choose to show up for one another. Because family isn't just who we're born to, it's who holds on when the world lets go. I wonder, did a moment in this story settle somewhere inside you? Did it touch a memory or a feeling you haven't visited in a while? If you're comfortable, tell me in the comments. I'd truly love to hear. And if this story meant something to you, even in a small, quiet way, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And don't head out just yet. There are more inspiring stories waiting for you on the end screen and in the playlist. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm Flint, wishing you comfort, warmth, and people who choose you again and again. I'll see you in the next story, my friend.